He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome to Coast View, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi a special place to live, work, and play. Hey, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to be able to have Steve Azar, the music and cultural ambassador for the state of Mississippi, singer-songwriter. We talked to him a couple of weeks ago. The thing about this conversation that I wanted to really zero in on is he does so much work in the community. I wanted to hear from him. How does that continue in this COVID environment? I want to talk to him about In a Mississippi Minute, the show that he does where he's talked to so many fascinating people over the course of the time that he's had doing that show. What does that show mean to him, and how has it changed things for him? But anyway, Steve, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Ricky, how you feeling?
I'm doing great, man. Hey, listen, one of the things that I've talked about continuously has been since we had our extended Coast View session together, and I was introduced to the song that you wrote about human trafficking. I've been on a little bit on a mission about that because I mentioned to you that I was always interested in and thought this would be an important conversation when I was publisher of the various newspapers that I was at. But after I heard your song, I started to focus even more on how could I, through Coast View, start to bring more awareness to this incredible problem. And it's complicated, and there's so many vulnerable people around the world who are subject to human trafficking, and people think of this thing as something that happens, far in a faraway land. They don't realize that human trafficking is something that's happening. It could be a neighbor, and the number of kids that are involved in human trafficking. That there's a market for children, Steve. I can't even get my head around that. I mean, I'm sure that's where you were when you sort of were introduced to the subject, and which led to your song. But, I really appreciate you for sort of zeroing me in a way that made me want to go on a mission about it.
Well, you are on a mission about it, and that is extremely important. I have a very dear friend who spent the last years of his detective life in Portland, Maine, that I got to know. Years ago, they brought me in for their big ball they were doing. They wanted me to play Waiting on Joe. That's why they brought me in. So I show up at the airport with my sidekick Jason, and all of a sudden there's three of them. They grab us, and they gave us jackets, and they were awful jackets, which I told them later, these jackets are, who's going to wear these? Second of all, and then they had bottles of whiskey, and I said, what's wrong with you guys? So, but I got to know this guy very well. His name's Steve Webster. He's already got a book out. Basically more on another subject, but he's writing the new one about a lot of this. So his last years were spent, and he would tell me that, I've got to go. When we were there playing shows, he'd come out with us. He goes, no, I got to go take care of a girl that I got her off the streets, and they hide them in certain hotels, in just certain rooms where he just had it worked out with the owner. And nobody, and then if you see these women, you'd never think it. Like, I've seen the ones that have recovered, and it feels like you're somebody in your family, that had never gone through such a horrible situation. And it's so we read about these in dark places in our newspaper and on social media and all that. Like, they don't really put it out in the front because it's very difficult to talk about. And like you and I discussed, not something you want to talk about over lunch because it's sickening, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was in South Dakota, I was helping raise money for the YMCA after school programs there with some other friends. And every once in a while, I would be asked to auction off me writing a song. Some of these songs have gone for up to $25,000 each. And so one was the Sanford's Children's Hospital there. One was I wrote for American Farmer. This one guy wanted me to write. And then another one, Patty Joe. I call her Patty Joe, Patty Joe's Prayer, which is The Sky is Falling. She comes up to me, she goes, she bought one of them. And so I call it the gift that keeps on giving, you never know. But she calls me, she goes, I want to have a discussion with you. So she calls me, she's crying her eyes out about this mission that she's on and how bad it is in South Dakota, right? And so South Dakota, seemed like wasn't real close to Nashville or Greenville, Mississippi, or the coast or whatever. It still seemed like it was far enough away from reality. You know what I mean? And so as I wrote the song, I called my buddy, my police officer buddy, Steve Webster, Detective Webster, and he said, and I said, I got to know more about it. And so basically, I wrote it and I'd consult with him, and he goes, "You got it." And so knowing that I got that, it was almost like when I wrote the song or ended up co-writing it with my producer back in the day, The River's Working. I wanted to make sure, because I haven't worked on a riverboat, but I wanted to make sure that I got it right. So I knew friends whose dads did, so I knew what they look like when they come off the boat. So these are, and how they responded when they were on dry land. They really weren't settled, and those things sort of came back when I was writing the song. But I still wanted to know more about it, so I asked some friends who worked on towboats for their whole life to making sure I got it right. So I did you got to do some research sometimes, right? As sterile as it sounds, but you got to get those songs right. So yeah, Sky's Falling, Patty Joe's Prayer just was something that I think we got right. And it was hard to write and listen to her tell me. And by the time we got off the phone, it was the same feeling leaving Governor Bryant's office when he was saying, "I want every kid to sing this song that you're going to write for the bicentennial." I wanted them to be able to do it, and it's just inspiring sometimes.
I hope that we can help contribute toward making it sort of the anthem for a conversation about human trafficking, and I'm going to stay focused on it for the small part that I can bring. But I mean, if you say one or two kids or one or two women who are hung up in that world, then I think you've done some good. Hey, so you mentioned writing these songs for charities, but you've actually, even in this COVID environment, you've been able to stay active in your charity work. I mean, you said you had just returned from Colorado. What were you doing there?
Well, doing an annual event for Golfers Against Cancer. Friends of ours, I met originally through the chapter in Houston. I recently had Bobby Jones on, not the golfer. Bobby Jones is a good guy, and he was one of the founders of Golfers Against Cancer back in the day. And then these chapters opened up, Huntington Beach, Denver. And so I've gotten to know everybody. A lot of MD Anderson, a lot of wild research going on that just doesn't happen unless these guys are raising money. And they take these applications from these great doctors who are doing research, who are basically around the corner and hidden in the corner. You know what I mean? These guys are doing it, and insane what they've accomplished and the lives they've saved and the testimonials we get to hear every year. So we had to do a virtual event. I did the Delta Soul here with my wife Gwen and our team, and we were very successful, as successful as we needed to be to keep our beneficiaries happy. With the year where our donors were unbelievable again, big sponsors all like fans. We were successful. We can keep doing what we're doing without having to have the event, right? Golfers Against Cancer was stressing over the same situation. They needed to raise a certain amount of money. They got matching funds when they get to a certain level, grant money that it just becomes like the blobs coming in and makes it bigger. And so we were successful, but the bad part was I was rusty, man. I haven't played. I've been recording, but I haven't played. Man, there was two songs. One song that I had to, that I was making up chords to because I couldn't remember. And by the time I got done with it, I still couldn't remember. And then one that I made up an entire verse to. It didn't even have any. Thank goodness I'm a songwriter, because first verse had nothing to do with anything. And I'm like going, oh my gosh, what am I? I was so rusty. You know what I mean? So I need to get out there and practice. But yeah, we were very successful with it, and they get to continue. So I don't know how often our great sponsors and people that are so generous can keep giving us an out if we have to do this again next year. I'm really worried about it if we can't get together. But for now, we're blessed with just great sponsors. They're unbelievable, these people.
So Golf Digest once identified you as one of the top 5 celebrity golfers. How's your golf game?
Awful. It's awful right now. So I'm getting killed by all my friends here. I used to get up in the morning if I was on the road or if I was whatever, and I'd go hit a triangle of balls, go out and work on my game. My short game was really good. I'd get up and down from China and back. It didn't matter, And I had gotten to the point, and I actually got to prove it. I went to Beverly Hills and with Kenny G and a group of the top 5 for Golf Digest with Arnold Palmer there and everything. And I shot 71 and I won the deal with the top 5. I think 3 of us were there. But it was good to beat Kenny G by 6. And he just ran out. That's the golf course he usually plays. Because he said a little smart aleck kind of word in the beginning. So my Mississippi competitive self got serious. But now, I mean, it's awful. I'm getting killed by my buddies, and they're going, oh, they're calling me, what do they call it? Oh, this is different from the celebrity circuit and all that. I'm going, guys, I'm going to tell you something. So, yeah, my golf game is not good right now, but it's because I came home to raise my kids, and I just didn't care. I still don't care, which is bad. So
we're coming to the end of the segment. When we come back, I want to talk about In the Mississippi Minute, but Kenny G, I once rode on an airplane with him. He flew coach to, I think he was going to do a concert at the Beau Rivage. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. I mean, he's really nice guy.
I'll tell you what,
I bet he is.
I don't even want to tell you what he told me to spark me to get it going, but it helped.
Okay, so this is Steve Azar, singer-songwriter, music and cultural ambassador for the state, host of In a Mississippi Minute. We'll be back after this break.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.
Thousands of Bulldog fans have subscribed to the Thunder and Lightning podcast. Have you? On each episode, Brian Haydad and Joel Coleman give you an inside look at your Mississippi State Bulldogs. The Thunder and Lightning podcast is free and available on demand at supertalk.fm and on your smartphone. Just search for Thunder and Lightning on iTunes, Google Play, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thunder and Lightning from SuperTalk, Mississippi, covering the Bulldogs like no one else.
This is House Call for Health. There may be no greater medical mystery and no greater tragedy than sudden infant death syndrome. It used to be known as crib death. For no apparent reason, a presumably healthy sleeping baby dies. Medical experts don't have clear-cut answers to what causes sudden infant death, or SIDS, but now they have 2 risk factors: smoking and drinking during pregnancy beyond the first 3 months. A new study finds that babies whose mothers drank alcohol and smoked tobacco after the first trimester are at far greater risk of SIDS, 12 times greater. Previous studies showed a risk of smoking and drinking individually. This study says doing both drastically increases the danger. The research is sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, which is calling for greater publicity about the danger and improved screening at the very beginning of a pregnancy. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
We know that we're asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
SuperTalk. Nobody keeps Mississippi informed like we do. With 12 stations covering all 82 counties. If it happens in your state, we're on top of it. The news, the weather, the sports, and the talk that's important to you. The issues that matter to you, your family, and your bank account. It's all right here. And when you're away from home, depend on the SuperTalk app and supertalk.fm to stay in the know. We're proud to serve our fellow Mississippians. SuperTalk, Mississippi. Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. Of Steve Azar, singer-songwriter, music and cultural ambassador for the state of Mississippi and host of In a Mississippi Minute. Steve, I bet that's been fun because I've really enjoyed this show. I bet you've really enjoyed doing that show.
Well, I learned to listen. Buddy, I keep saying that when I'm on the show, but it reminds me to listen. Just my thick head, sometimes I forget. But at the beginning, it was funny. It was John Daly, Bill Engvall, Gary Valentine, Jim McMahon, Grant Fuhr. It was Richard Karn. So these groups of people that everybody knew. And I was trying to be funny, I think, just like, I have to be a witty sort of deal. And then Gary Valentine told me, Kevin James, they were listening. Gary said, Steve, you really are good at this, but start listening more. And don't worry about being funny because you have this natural wit anyway. Just let it happen as it comes. And when they said that, it was interviewing my dad and my father-in-law that I realized for Father's Day. I realized, why don't I know this about them? And I realized I hadn't been listening to anybody. I've been asked the questions my whole life because of the position that I'm in. I'm the one being interviewed. So it has been a true blessing to learn to listen, that art that I didn't have. And now it's a virtue. I think if listening's a virtue, I think I'm getting better at it. But yeah, it's been such a thrill. And SuperTalk, it's like you. We're talking about our almost 300 shows now. I'm cracking up. I'm thinking we have 4 shows or one, and we're 4 and we're done, And now it's late into my 3rd year. And how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, since January the 6th.
Well, it's just fantastic. And so for you, aren't you just loving it?
When I tell people all the time, when I was publisher of these newspapers for the last 16 years of my career, I met a lot of people, but I didn't know anybody. You know what I mean by that?
Exactly right.
I didn't know anybody. And what I've learned is to me, it's really been so awesome getting to know what makes these people tick, getting behind the public face and really meeting and getting to know the person. And here's the thing I've learned, that in our fast-paced world, we form these initial impressions of people. And I'm going to tell you, man, I'm just telling you based on my experience, that too often those initial impressions are wrong. They're just wrong. And not until you really understand, where someone's coming from, what are they passionate about, what makes them tick, how are they as people outside the public, life. It's just, man, it's a gift. It's been a gift to me.
To get to know this too, Ricky, is if we ask the questions, and then once somebody gets comfortable, then they share things that maybe they don't have shared in the situation. I think you and I ask questions a little different from most. You coming from your background and me being on the other side of it, I got asked the same questions over and over where I could just had just recorded myself and just post it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't want to do that.
I always challenge myself, and I notice that you do a lot of homework. So I do my own homework too. And I just feel like that it's important to dig a little deeper. Also, people don't talk about their past, their wonder years. It's a cliche now on my show, but it sets up the story, what their folks were like. How did they support them? Sometimes their folks were wonderful. Sometimes they were awful. They tell you.
Yeah.
Sometimes their upbringings were tough, and sometimes they were in nurture over nature, all this stuff. But the bottom line is it proves each one of them wrong or right. But with Favre, it was awesome because, first of all, we were talking and we're old friends. And so we hadn't talked in a while. We caught up at SuperTalk and we said, do my show. He said, of course. So we're doing it. And
you actually did a record together.
Well, we did. We did back in the day. Every time I'd show up to do the anthem in Lambeau, they'd play that record, me and Brett singing together, born with it. But the deal was, we were 8 minutes into the interview. I hadn't even started. Like you and me talk now. Kyle's probably going, we got to start the official interview. Brett's talking. I said, Brett, I got to do an intro, But he spent most of the time talking about his high school days, which I never knew he threw for only 150 yards his senior year. And he told me about the line coach that recruited him and his dad, Herb's budding relationship. And it's just insane. He comes in as the number 7 quarterback. Like they're not even paying attention to him. And I just think that's just remarkable. You know what I'm saying?
It's such a cool story. Then what was it? You said you said, did he have a finger bowl?
Yeah, yeah.
Referring to the number of fingers that he's broke because he threw the ball so hard. I thought that was such an interesting way to say
every
that.
time we go to Lambeau, I'd see all his receivers. They just didn't have. They had splints on their fingers. Like these guys.
Well, you know what was interesting? I'm a Southern Miss graduate, so I followed him closely at most of those games. And a lot of us said, if he ever gets into the NFL and has receivers that can actually catch his balls, I mean, he broke every record there was. Yeah. But there were a lot of missed catches because he threw the ball so dang hard, man.
Through people. It's like, I know. Look, it was funny, but I got to. It's just amazing his story. I mean, just the way he played. You think about the Manning family and Brett all down there, right?
Yeah.
Then this whole little circle, and now you got little Arch coming along. Who's not little. And, and Granddaddy Archie's saying he's at this point he's better. And I'm like, gosh. So
isn't that something?
It's pretty dang cool to have these incredible athletes come from our state. It's another example of our art form. Sports is an art form, and we've got per capita probably the best ever.
Yeah. So what's interesting, though, you've got a mix of people. So because you travel all over the world, you've had this opportunity to meet a lot of people. So, a lot of these people you have relationships with, and some you don't even know. You just, just coming because you share a passion for something, whether it be golf or whatever the situation might be. It's fun, though, when you're able to connect with someone who, like some of the music folks that you bring on, the fact that you have a relationship with them and able to talk their language and really able to get sort of to the nut of who they are, that's a lot of fun, isn't it?
Ricky, we never spent the time to have those discussions. We just got together, probably shared 150, 200 meals together, knew everything we thought about each other except everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Nothing about each other because we just never talked about it. Now you share in song and you dig deep and you share. You think that you open yourself up, but you don't open yourself up to certain questions that would be answered if you asked those. So you just don't have time in a writing session or whatever, and then you just get to know them at the time that they are now. That we all got to know each other. Then we didn't dig back, but listen, we all live the same story. I mean, somewhere along the line, there is a common thread between us all. We all grew up, had a garage band. We all played clubs. We played fraternity houses. We played, it was the same story. It's 3 doors down, the same story. It's Paul Overstreet, Marty Stewart. Marty's got a different story because Marty was a prodigy and was playing for, Lester Flats at 13. So he doesn't count. He's Beethoven. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyway, but
who stands out? If you had to look back and say, okay, wow, now that was an amazing interview.
The best interview by far is the Greg Williams story. Greg Williams was a kid from here who was a little older than me that had to basically walk on his high school team, small, fast. Nobody wanted him in college, went to Moorhead, walked on, became a starter, went to Mississippi State, was living in the athletic dorm. His family only had 3 months of tuition to pay. Moved into the athletic dorm with a friend. He wasn't even enrolled in school to play football because he didn't know he had to enroll in school. He's at Mississippi State. He becomes a starter. Back in the Johnny Cook days, right? And then nobody in the NFL, they sort of paying attention because he got good, right? Then he walks on the NFL. Then he wins. He not only wins a Super Bowl ring with the Redskins, he matters starting. His first game, his first thing was like a pick six, or he had 2 picks in the first game. It's Rudy on steroids times 10. Hoosiers, remember the Titans. It's every great miracle on ice. And I've interviewed, Michael Eruzione. Michael's a friend. In fact, I'm going to his charity event in Boston to help him out at the end of the month.
What a great story that is. My goodness.
But Greg Williams' story was insane because there was too many things. Who goes to college to play football? They don't know he's there. He's in the athletic dorm eating the food, and they're going, "Who are you?" And then you win a Super Bowl, and not only do you win a Super Bowl, you matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start for the Redskins. That's insane. It was a 2-part series. I left thinking, what on earth, Anyway.
But what an honor and a pleasure it is to be able to have that conversation.
Oh my God. I told my son Strack, I said, I know you're not into sports movies, but this is quirky enough that you can make it your own, but this has got to be written. This is brilliant, So anyway, but yeah, it has been good. And, interviewing our buddy, David Abney, the CEO of UPS. He's from Greenwood and went to Delta State. His greatest memories with his dad was going to Mississippi State. And there's just so many stories. I mean, it's just insane. It's been a blessing, and so
we got less than a minute, but people should know that you can go to any of your favorite podcasts. It doesn't matter which one it is, and look up In a Mississippi Minute, and you'll see all of the interviews. And I really highly encourage you. You've got a great interview style. It really puts people at ease. It is fun. You're able to share lots of commonalities with whoever you're talking to. So I really encourage people. Go ahead.
Practice, because when I'm 2 weeks out of practice, it's ask questions. Asking questions is difficult.
Yeah. So if you do your homework, but you got to do your homework. You can't wing this deal. Hey, Steve, thank you for joining.
I'm going I want to be like Ricky.
No, I want to be like you. Hey, listen, it's been great to spend time with you. I look forward to seeing you again soon, buddy.
You're the best.
Take care. This has been Steve Azar, singer-songwriter and music and cultural ambassador for the state of Mississippi.
Subscribe for free to the Coast View podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to go by this station's website and check out the half-off deals. Audubon Zoo tickets for just $15. That's half price. $30 zoo tickets for just $15. Again, go to this station's website or Facebook. Look for the half-off deals logo to purchase yours now.
Heart attacks and strokes don't stay home. So don't avoid the ER out of anxiety. Don't die of doubt. If you have an emergency, call 911. When seconds count, the hospital is the safest place to be.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. Talking to Paul Thorne, Mississippi true treasure, really incredible recording artist, singer-songwriter, has been doing it a long time, doing it the right way.
It's almost like a Forrest Gump thing because, I was a boxer, / I worked in a furniture factory, / I had a gig 2 nights a week playing my acoustic guitar in a pizza restaurant, / I was in the National Guard, and, all this stuff was going on at the same time. / I had a writing contract with Rick Hall and Fame.
In a Mississippi Minute. Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, the SuperTalk Mississippi app, and now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
There's a place to share gossip about the office party fun, and a place to share the story you tell everyone. There's a place to share a laugh about when things went wrong, and a place to share the video of you dancing to your song. There's a place to share spare change, lunch, and your time. But we could all be better at sharing how we're feeling inside. 76% of employees have struggled with at least one issue that affected their mental health. When you share, you're not alone.
Feeling down? Here's your prescription for a daily dose of good news and positive vibes. Good Things with Rebecca Turner. Every afternoon, Rebecca highlights all the good things happening right here in the state you call home. Daily exposure to Good Things with Rebecca Turner may cause smiling, feelings of positivity, happiness, and even laughter. When you experience these symptoms, tell your friends to listen.
Okay.
Weekdays starting at 2 p.m. here on SuperTalk Mississippi, and now on Amazon Alexa devices.
This is House Call for Health. There may be no greater medical mystery and no greater tragedy than sudden infant death syndrome. It used to be known as crib death. For no apparent reason, a presumably healthy sleeping baby dies. Medical experts don't have clear-cut answers to what causes sudden infant death, or SIDS, but now they have 2 risk factors: smoking and drinking during pregnancy beyond the first 3 months. A new study finds that babies whose mothers drank alcohol and smoked tobacco after after the first trimester are at far greater risk of SIDS, 12 times greater. Previous studies showed a risk of smoking and drinking individually. This study says doing both drastically increases the danger. The research is sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, which is calling for greater publicity about the danger and improved screening at the very beginning of a pregnancy. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
You could be spreading the coronavirus without realizing you have it, so do your part and stay home. It's important to limit in-person interaction with anyone outside of your immediate household, but phone and video chat are safe ways to connect. It's also important to limit social gatherings. If you need essential items like food and medicine, try using a delivery service. If you must leave your house for essential items, or if you want to take a walk for exercise, make sure to wear a cloth face covering. Stay at least 6 feet away from other people. Try not to touch frequently touched surfaces like light signals, street signs, or benches. And wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds as often as possible. This advice applies to people of any age, including teens and younger adults. It takes all of us to slow the spread of the coronavirus, so stay home unless absolutely necessary. Visit coronavirus.gov for the latest information.
Whether you're a Rebel, a Bulldog, a Golden Eagle, or just a sports fan, SuperTalk Mississippi has got a podcast for you. For you. Sports Talk Mississippi, the Rebel Report, Thunder and Lightning, the SuperTalk Eagle Hour, and the Borky Show are all now available for you. And it's all free. Get them all on demand at supertalk.fm and on your smartphone. Just search for SuperTalk on iTunes, Google Play, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. That was an awesome conversation with Steve Azar, my friend Steve Azar, the singer-songwriter. Just a dynamic guy who is so important to Mississippi. If you missed that interview, you can go to the SuperTalk Mississippi YouTube page or the SuperTalk Gulf Coast Facebook page and watch that terrific conversation with Steve Azar. You can also see the last 2 or 3 conversations that I've had with him. He's the music and culture ambassador for the state of Mississippi and just a terrific spokesman. Now we're going to shift gears. Come back into the conversation. Ashley Edwards, who is the president and CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, a regular on the show. He's got a really good handle on things. And today what we're going to do is we're going to continue the conversation that I began to have with Ashley and Adele Lyons recently related to the BP money. And we had a conversation Monday with Ben Brown where we talked about mixed-use developments and creating walkable communities, what we learned right after Hurricane Katrina about the unbelievable opportunities in front of us to create the kind of communities that are going to really attract the kind of jobs and people that we need to really diversify our economy. We're doing good at the manufacturing level. We're doing good at the tourism and hospitality level. It's those jobs in the middle, the entrepreneurs, the what we refer to as the creative class. This is where we could really do well. And it's different, as Anthony Wilson pointed out in a recent interview. It's different because in the old days, you would bring a manufacturer in and people would move in and move around the factory or the town. Whereas today, companies tend to go toward where those people are living who can work for them. Or even more important, as we're learning in the pandemic, people could actually work for a company in New York and live in downtown Gulfport. That's kind of the where technology is really enabling changes. So if we can build the kind of places where people can come, it's going to really change things. So the BP money is certainly in the conversation because this is a bucket of money that a lot of communities don't have that can help us make projects more viable. And what I want to do with this conversation with Ashley today is kind of go back through it a little bit. I want to understand the process, legislative role in the process, what the intent of the advisory committee was going to be, the recommendations that this committee made to the legislature, what was funded, what wasn't, how did projects get funded that never were part of the process. There's a lot I want to know about this. So, Ashley, I appreciate you joining me to have this conversation.
Happy to do it, Ricky. Thank you.
So let's remind people, when the money from BP was on its way to coastal Mississippi, there was a really big chance that that money was going to be headed into the general fund and just get appropriated out to the rest of the state. Let's remind people how much money it is, how many years it's going to last, what's the annual distribution of the money, and then remind them about the effort that we had to engage in coastal Mississippi to fight for a share of that money. Let's kind of walk through it.
So, we hear the term BP money a lot, and people wonder sometimes exactly what that means. What we're talking about when we say the BP money is a economic damage settlement agreement that was done with BP after the oil spill, and it was with the state of Mississippi. So this is not the money for restoration of the environmental issues. Those are dollars that are flowing through a federal process. This was money that BP gave Mississippi for the economic damage it caused during the oil spill. So it's a settlement, just like if you had a car wreck and you settled with the person for damages that were caused. It was $750 million that would come to Mississippi over the course of about 19 years. We're now in year 5 of that. And so we've got 14 years or so remaining on it. The money was not earmarked to go to the coast or for any specific purpose. It was money that just went into the general fund of the state treasury. And as a result, it was money the legislature could spend on anything. And, we fought very hard to try to create a framework for that money that would do a couple of things. Number one, it would ensure that the money, or at least the majority of it, would be spent in coastal Mississippi, since we were the areas that were actually impacted by the oil spill. And number two, that there would be a process in place to ensure that that money would be spent in a way that it actually would do what it was intended to do, which is help to repair the economic engine of the state that was damaged here along the coast. And, it was a 3-year effort, really, working in Jackson to try to create legislation that would do that. In 2018, in a special session of the legislature, the state legislature passed bills that would give 75% of the funds to the 6 coastal counties of Mississippi and 25% to everyone else. And that 75% is under something called the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. It is a fund that is set up with an advisory board. Applications come in every year through the fund to the Mississippi Development Authority. They're vetted by MDA. They're then vetted by a group of appointed coast representatives that ultimately, before December 1st of every year, create a recommendation that is then sent to the legislature, so that during the upcoming legislative session, the legislature can look at those recommendations and make decisions about how they will appropriate the funds in each given year. And that just happened for the first time. We had, during 2019, the process played out, applications submitted, went to MDA, were vetted by the advisory board. Recommendations were then made to the legislature, and the legislature in the beginning of July actually appropriated funds to projects.
So what was interesting to me was the recommendations you made. You made those recommendations. Not all the advisory committee members agreed on everything. That's the democratic process. But the majority did agree with essentially kind of a laundry list of projects. Were they placed in priority, the highest priority to lowest priority based on the committee's input? Is that what you did?
No, they weren't prioritized. And so what we did is we just have a straight up or down vote.
I gotcha.
Either recommend or not recommend on a project. And so each project that receives a majority of votes for recommend is sent to the legislature. And just to give you an idea, I want to say there were 11 projects recommended out of 119 submitted. So it's a pretty small number of projects. Less than 10% of the projects that were submitted actually received a recommendation from the committee and then were submitted to the legislature.
So let me take a quick sidestep for a second, because I want to focus for just a second on the process you guys went through to actually take those 11 projects and make those the recommendation. What Ben and I talked about the other day, Monday, was the fact that there are developers all over the country that want to do mixed use. In this pandemic situation, it's harder to make those projects viable. But they know that the economy was already changing before the pandemic. And as you and I have discussed before, what the pandemic did is just speed up trends that were already out there. In other words, the creative class being incredibly mobile. They could work for companies all over the United States, but live in a place far away from where their home office is. They could work remotely. Remotely is a really important thing. You have entrepreneurs that are technology companies and other kind of companies that could really start their businesses anywhere. And as Eric Keel pointed out, Mississippi has incredible opportunities in this realm, and it's as much about the place they live as it is anything. So they're going to choose a place, as Eric says, where they can find a spouse. So what you want is to build places where people can live, work, and play in the same area. And one of the points that Ben and I talked about was this, that you have sort of a formula, X plus Y equals. X would be a high cost of building as a result of Katrina and the whole issue of fortification and building up, building hard. That's really expensive. You won't get insurance if you don't do it. And then you add to that, if you build a mixed-use project, it's a very expensive project to begin with because of all the ancillary pieces to it. It's not just an apartment building. It's retail down below, and it's got all kinds of amenities and parking and all the things that you would need in a mixed-use development that would take place downtown. So, but X plus Y equals a lot of money, a lot of money. So in this particular example that I'm giving, mixed use is just one of many possibilities. You're talking about using the BP money to be able to contribute toward a project like that would get the cost per square foot down, that would make it a doable project, to make it a feasible project. And so we should, that's just one example. But I'm assuming that what you looked at was projects that you could build that would do something like a mixed-use development would do, which would attract entrepreneurs and creative class, take advantage of the changes in this new economy in a way that really, creates a transformative project, one that really could pay back for many years to come. Is that the approach y'all took?
That's exactly the approach we took. We going back 3 years, when we were fighting to try to get this legislation put in place, we wanted criteria in the legislation that would really define the types of projects that would receive funding. And now in the end, the legislature put some pretty broad criteria, but a number that were specifically focused on the projects like the type that you mentioned, quality of place-making projects to make us more competitive in the evolving economy. And I'll tell you, certainly one of the strategies that the advisory board took on was trying to determine how to fund projects that would leverage other investment. So $1 would bring in $10 more from outside sources to our economy.
We're going to pick it up right there when we come back from the break. But this is Ashley Edwards, the Gulf Coast Business Council, and we're going to continue the conversation about the allocation of the BP oil spill money after this break.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Twitter @SuperTalkMSGC.
SuperTalk. Nobody keeps Mississippi informed like we do. With 12 stations covering all 82 counties. If it happens in your state, we're on top of it. The news, the weather, the sports, and the talk that's important to you. The issues that matter to you, your family, and your bank account. It's all right here. And when you're away from home, depend on the SuperTalk app and supertalk.fm to stay in the know. We're proud to serve our fellow Mississippians. SuperTalk Mississippi.
We know that we're asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Hey, I'm Steve Azar, and you never know who or what you'll hear when I spend a Mississippi Minute with my friends. We are with the fabulous Norbert Putnam, as he played on so many hit records, you can't count them, and produced for some of the biggest acts ever. Norbert, Elvis.
And I want to tell you about Presley. He had two different voices. He would sit and talk to me in a very calm, low voice. And we were at Stack's one night, and we were having lunch. We always had lunch at midnight because he was nocturnal. We sat there and we have our sandwiches, and at 1 o'clock, he looked up. He said, "Hey, Putt, come on, it's time for me to go beat Elvis." And he stood up, in a much deeper voice, he put on his macho voice. "Hey, fellas, it's 1 o'clock. Let's get cracking, okay?"
In a Mississippi Minute. Be sure to check out In a Mississippi Minute with me, Steve Azar, right here on SuperTalk Mississippi, Amazon Alexa, and now on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
It's me, you, anyone that wants to be.
There is no typical firefighter.
Everyone knows the only thing better than pizza is free pizza, and right now, buy a $10 gift certificate to CiCi's Pizza for only $5. It's like buying a pizza and getting a pizza for free. Go to our station's website or Facebook. Look for the Half Off Deals logo to purchase this amazing deal right now.
We give HPV vaccine to children at 11 or 12 years of age. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I've given the vaccine to all of them.
Get out of the house and over to Big Play today. 2 massive arcades, bowling, go-karts, 2 mini golf courses, a 2-story state-of-the-art laser tag arena, bumper cars, and right now get a $50 game card for only $25. Visit our station's Facebook and print on demand so you can play at Big Play Entertainment Center now. These deals won't last long, so make sure you get your half-off deal. Big Play Entertainment Center, Highway 90, Biloxi. Bowl, play, eat. Go to our station's Facebook to get your half-off deal now.
Talking to the people that help make the coast such a unique place to live. This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. Ashley Edwards here, the president and CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. And we're talking about the BP oil spill money and the fight that we had to go through to get some of that allocated to coastal Mississippi. The legislature created an advisory committee that takes all these applications and looks at them and then makes recommendations. They just vote them up or down, majority rules, and then they send those to the legislature. And we were given some examples of the kind of projects that we'd like to do, not buildings like a public building that doesn't really have a payback, but building the kind of projects where you're encouraging investors to come in and spend tens of millions of dollars that could create sort of a sustainable project that pays back for many, many years to come, that the initial investment is just the beginning of incredible transformative economic benefits that you get from this. That's where we were in the conversation. So you had 11 projects that the committee voted up or down. So then that goes to the legislature. But what I remember is that of the 11 projects, not all of them were approved, and suddenly projects that never even came through the advisory committee were approved. So is there another part of this? I mean, I thought that the projects had to come through the advisory committee in order to get recommended to the legislature. Is there also a political process? Explain that to me.
So this is a very important distinction, and it's a question I get asked a lot. And it's, folks will say, well, I thought that you had to submit an application and go through the process in order to be considered. Well, the legislature made sure when they finalized the legislation they ultimately passed, they would have ultimate control over the process. And so our committee is only advisory. We are only making recommendations. And this year, what we saw was a legislature funded really 3 categories of projects. They funded a few of the projects that were recommended, although not generally in the amount of money that was requested. So there's some questions about whether those projects can actually go forward based on the amount of funding they received. They also funded some projects that were not recommended by the committee, but were vetted. They did not receive the votes to be recommended, but the legislature funded them. And then there's a third category of projects, and those are projects that did not submit an application. They did not get vetted. They were not, the committee was not aware of them, and the legislature appropriated money to them. And so, clearly based on the precedent the legislature has set this first year, the only way to get a project funded is not simply through the process that they created. There's clearly a sort of a second means to do that. And the legislature ultimately has the prerogative to make that decision if they choose to. Now, whether or not that's a good idea is certainly a matter of debate. But they funded some things that were across the board. In fact, the morning that they actually passed the appropriations bill with these projects in them was the first time that I had ever heard of a few of the projects that actually received funding this year. And that was disappointing because we worked for a year. When I tell you that we put in literally hundreds of hours reviewing 119 applications that were submitted, many of those applications with hundreds of pages attached, and the time that we invested in really trying to understand their business plans, understand the financial plan, understand the return on investment analysis of each of these projects to make a determination about what constituted good, solid investments that would leverage other funds. We put a lot of work into that that process. And, in the end, I think it's fair to say that process did not play a lead role in what the legislature chose to fund.
So what I'm curious about now, I see that myself as well. So, but I'm still trying to understand more about the process. The question now is, has there been some sort of like process check moment where they say, okay, time out. Let's look at how this all played out, and let's see how we can ensure the integrity of the advisory role. So what changes can we make in that process that can solidify the recommendations and put us in a position as a legislature to be able to say, okay, was there something wrong with the process? Was there some reason to circumvent it? Did it become more political than they intended it to become? Are they focused on sustainable economic projects that create jobs? Or are they interested in building, public buildings and just doing brick and mortar that doesn't have a payback? How do we get aligned around that? And has there been that sort of process check?
Well, Ricky, I think it's important to sort of look at it from this perspective. One of the reasons that we fought so hard to try to put this process in place was because the legislature had already spent $150 million in the funds in the first few years without really any visibility or transparency in the process. And, in some cases, local legislators even argued that they were spending that money on the coast. But we had some doubts about, the viability of the projects they were receiving. And so we said, how do we get better projects? And so really what happened this year is exactly what's happened every other year. Ultimately, the legislature just picked whatever they wanted to fund. So it's not unprecedented. Although it was the first year for the process to be in place, it's really the fourth year that they have allocated money to projects of their choosing. And in many cases, they just continue to do the same thing they've done in the other years.
Well, we're out of time, but I really appreciate, Ashley, you kind of helping me understand the process. One of the things I'm going to be working toward is how do we fortify the recommendations of that advisory committee. If some kind of adjustments need to be made, we need to look at that. But at the end of the day, what we want are economically viable projects that are going to have paybacks for many years to come, transformative, so that we can invite developers in here and say, hey, you may not be able to afford to do this project, but if we help you through this process, this BP process, we might be able to make this project doable. And by doing these type of projects and inviting these kind of developers here, we're able to do things that other communities can't do. In this pandemic moment, with the trends that we see, it's a really unique opportunity. So I'm not looking to hammer anybody about it. I'm not trying to, roll over anybody, but just bring awareness to the fact that sustainability is where the focus needs to be. Thank you for helping me get a better understanding of that, and we'll be talking a whole bunch more about it as we go forward. Have a great day, Ashley.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
Listen live or on demand and watch episodes of Coast View on your laptop, desktop, or on your phone or tablet by going to supertalkmsgulfcoast.com.